Thank you so much for tuning in to our Food for Thought series with Dr. MJ. We are back with the letter O. Who do we have for the letter O?
Ben Okri.
Ben Okri, the Famished Road.
Yep.
All right, so why did you select Ben Okri and what is the quote?
He is a Nigerian writer and Nigerian British, I guess. He lives in the UK. I think they would call him or his genre of writing magical realism, but he might call it realism, it's just a way of how certain societies view reality. So the book is about Azaro, who is a spirit child who is born only to live for a short while before returning to the idyllic world of his spirit companions. But now he has chosen to stay in the world of living. This is his story. That's what it says in the back. And basically, the story is about this. But it starts off with these group of spirit children, in the otherworldly realm, who are very happy to live in this other world, the other world, right? The non-living world that we know. Mm-hmm. And they're just happy, in this bubble of love and fairies and spirits and whatever it is that they live in. And then, but at some point they have to they have to reincarnate into the world of the living. Mm-hmm. And this particular spirit child is not interested. He doesn't want to come. So he keeps delaying. But then, he chooses a certain set of parents. So it's this whole thing, they choose who they want their parents to be. But in this particular spirit child's case, it's at the parents he chooses, they get hit by colonialism arrives in their country at the time he chooses them. So it's a bad time to become their child because they've just been invaded. And then all these things happen to them. And it's always a bad time. So this is a story of this. It's a crazy story. But eventually when he comes into the world and decides to stay, he is one of these spirit children that's really half in, half out, not fully committed to being in the living world. And those people are the ones that become seers or knowers that have, what you would call, people you might call mediums, people like witches, whoever, people who have a connection to the spirit world. Mm-hmm. So the book is fascinating to me. The concepts in it are fascinating to me. The idea, the way he that idea of us being part of a spirit world, which I do believe in, but he just paints it so vividly. So the passage is just the very first page, just so you get a taste of how he's telling the story. So, in that land of beginnings, spirits mingled with the unborn. We could assume numerous forms. Many of us were birds. We knew no boundaries. There was much feasting, playing, and sorrowing. We feasted much because of the beautiful terrors of eternity. We played much because we were free. And we sorrowed much because there were always those amongst us who had just returned from the world of the living. They had returned inconsolable for all the love they had left behind, all the suffering they hadn't redeemed, all that they hadn't understood, and for all that they had barely begun to learn before they were drawn back to the land of origins. There was not one amongst us who looked forward to being born. We disliked the rigors of existence, the unfulfilled longings, the enshrined injustices of the world, the labyrinths of love, the ignorance of parents, the fact of dying, and the amazing indifference of the living in the midst of the simple beauties of the universe. We feared the heartlessness of human beings, all of whom are born blind, few of whom ever learn to see. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. And why did you select this quote?
Just because it's the beginning of the book and it captures, it starts by telling the story of these people in the spirit world, and then the idea that it's a spiritual story, it's a magical story, but the idea, which I completely buy into, that we're spirit beings who have a human existence, and and that and that we choose where we like how we enter the world. We understand that there's a purpose to our entering the world, but once we enter the world of the living, we forget that we are spirit beings, that we have a path, that we have, as they say here, like, what did he say? That there's work for us to do in this world, right? That there's suffering to redeem, that there's love, there's healing, there's the different roles for us to play that some of us remember and some of us forget. But that until we complete that work, we go back to the spirit world, come back again. I wholly believe in it. And it's an amazing story of a spirit child and his travels between the two realms. And Ben Okri writes that way. He writes stories that are spiritually transcendent, and that gives you a whole other take on the injustices and the sufferings of the world and history and those kinds of things, if you think about it as you're actually a spiritual being in a human experience. Like, that's so the human part is just an experience, the spirit part is who you really are.
I believe it. I'm about to send Hollywood an alley-oop and say that this should be a movie.
This guy's books should be movies. Like, they're amazing. Like,
yeah,
he's amazing. He's a great writer. So I have a few other, but they're all, a lot of them are in the realm of, again, what they call magical realism, what some of us would just be, many cultures would, this is just their view of life, that it doesn't begin and end when you're a living person in the world that we know, right? That there's more worlds to it than this.
Okay, Ben Okri. That is our selection.
Ben Okri.
Famished Road. The letter O. We'll be back.